Welcome back, Longbox crew. Clark Parker for Comicsquick, and today's got a little bit of everything. DC's letting us in on how its first ever absolute crossover is actually going to work. Marvel spent the week flip-flopping on the actual cover for Amazing Spider-Man's 1000th issue, and Marvel's launching a horror version of its own universe that sounds genuinely unsettling. Three stories, then a quick round of smaller news. Let's get into it. We start with DC because the Absolute Universe's first ever crossover just got a lot more real than the test balloon size everyone expected. DC's confirmed new details on the event, landing this November. Jason Aaron is writing it, but Scott Snyder's been clear that every Absolute writer, Snyder himself, Dennis Camp, the whole roster, is in the room plotting it together before Aaron puts words on the page. Absolute Batman, Absolute Superman, and Absolute Wonder Woman anchor it, with Absolute Martian Manhunter serving as the connective tissue pulling the separate books into one story. The cast list alone tells you how seriously DC's taking this. The Flash, Green Lantern, Catwoman, Green Arrow, Barbara Gordon, Bane, Ra's al Ghul, Guy Gardner, Abin Sur, Lois Lane. That's not a cameo parade. That's DC building an actual shared universe instead of three separate hit books that happen to share a logo. What I like here is the discipline. The Absolute line built its reputation by keeping each book singular and tightly controlled. No crossovers, no event fatigue, just Snyder, Aaron, and the rest doing their own thing really well. Waiting this long to combine them and doing it as a planned room effort instead of an editorial mandate is exactly how you avoid the thing that wore out Marvel's last few universe-wide events. Nobody walks into November having to read 4 tie-ins just to understand the main book. I'm in, and I don't say that about every crossover anymore. Now over to Marvel, because they're having a much messier week than DC. This one's less about a comic and more about how Marvel handles a mess it created for itself. Amazing Spider-Man number 1000 ships September 16th. Billed is the biggest single issue in Spider-Man's history. Extra pages, a stacked roster of returning creators, the works. The planned main cover came from John Romita Jr., with Paulo Rivera painting over his pencils. Spider-Man seen from street level, getting yanked upward by his own webbing, his whole body warping from the G-force. Cool idea on paper. Online reaction did not read it as a cool idea. It read it as Spider-Man shrugging, and the jokes piled up fast enough that Marvel editorial actually pulled the cover. Quietly dropped from retailer listings, replaced by a new main cover from Pepe Larraz instead. And then, days later, Marvel reversed course again and put the Romita Jr. and Rivera cover back. Not as a variant this time, but as the actual main cover, with Larraz's version sliding into the variant slot. This is the one I'm picking a fight about today. Pulling a cover because the internet didn't like it, then unpulling it less than a week later, isn't editorial confidence. It's letting a comment section run your publishing schedule in real time. I didn't even think the Romita Jr. cover deserved the mockery it got. But flip-flopping twice on the most symbolic cover of the year tells retailers and fans Marvel doesn't trust its own creative calls, and that's a worse look than one weird-looking cover ever was. Marvel's also doing something unusual with its own line, just in the opposite direction, adding chaos on purpose. The new Midnight Universe is real, and it's launching all 3 debut issues on the same day, October 7th, with nothing else from Marvel shipping that week. Midnight X-Men comes from Jonathan Hickman and Matteo Delafonte, Midnight Fantastic Four from Benjamin Percy and Kev Walker, and Midnight Spider-Man from Philip Kennedy Johnson and Cy Tronk. The pitch is horror versions of Marvel's biggest teams. X-Men who hunger instead of fighting for acceptance, a Fantastic Four that goes looking for the unknown specifically to unleash it, and a Spider-Man where great power turns into something monstrous instead of responsible. Clearing the entire release day for just these 3 books is a real statement from Marvel, not just hype copy. Philip Kennedy Johnson's already said Midnight Spider-Man has the longest outline he's ever written for a series, which tells me this isn't a one-shot horror gimmick. There's an actual plan underneath it. My only hesitation is that horror version of a famous superhero team has become its own little subgenre lately, and not every entry earns the premise past the first arc. But putting Hickman on X-Men horror and clearing Marvel's whole release slate around it tells me this is being treated as a real swing, not a seasonal cash-in. I want to see October 7th land. 3 smaller beats worth knowing before we wrap. Green Lantern number 36 hits shelves Wednesday, and Kyle Rayner's ex Jade is back in his corner for a genuinely strange one. Somebody's murdering people across a string of LA fast food joints, and the trail leads Kyle into a fight with someone called Dr. Skin that's apparently big enough to make him pull the White Lantern out of mothballs. Kyle's been due for a Stranger book, and this is stranger. Over in the Venom family, issue 259 gives Mary Jane Watson a brand new symbiote look as part of the Queen and Black crossover, and writer Al Ewing's calling it a leveling up moment after her last close call with the Bond. Dylan Brock's also making a call in this issue that could permanently shake up who's wearing a symbiote at all going forward. And over at Image, Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen are reuniting for Crowbound, a new ongoing launching September 2nd about a mother fighting her way through a totalitarian world to save her daughter from something called the Scarecrow Queen. Lemire's calling it the darkest thing he and Nguyen have done together. And after Descender and Black Hammer, that's saying something. So that's the day. DC's first absolute crossover turned out to have way more spine than a victory lap event usually does. Marvel spent a week arguing with itself over one Spider-Man cover before landing right back where it started. And Marvel's clearing its whole release calendar in October to launch a horror universe it's clearly betting real money on. Two questions for you. Does an absolute crossover actually need this much connective tissue? Or is DC overbuilding before book one even ships? And was Marvel right to cave on that cover? Or should it have stuck with the weird one? Drop both in the comments. I read everyone. If Comicsquick's pulling its weight in your feed, go ahead and subscribe. Go support your local comic shop, grab those pre-orders, and keep reading comics. I've been Clark Parker for Comicsquick. See you in the next one.